Using a double tap gesture in SwiftUI. A double tap gesture works in the same way as mouse double click event in traditional user interfaces. In this video, we will look at how to zoom in the image using the double tap gesture. And once the image is zoomed in, I'll show you how to use the double tap gesture to zoom the image out. To register a double tap gesture event, the finger must touch down on the screen and then be lifted up again and touch down again within a limited time and within a limited spatial area on the screen surface. This ensures that the gesture registered is actually a double tap and not any unrelated touch event. Before we create the double tap gestural interaction in SwiftUI, let's look at how it works visually using a timeline animation tool called Kite. Over here, I have created the same interaction I showed in the beginning of this video. In Kite, I have added an action called double tap. In the properties inspector, you can see the event type is mouse clicked. To enable the double tap gesture, we have to set the click count to 2. So over here you can see I have the event type set as mouse clicked. Then we have the options click count set to 2 and we are using the left mouse. Also, I have added a spring animation. When I go to the layer list and select the animation, you can see here we have the animation called zoomed. When the animation is selected from the properties inspector, you can see there is a spring animation and that animates the property transform scale, that is the XY coordinate of the image. The actual size of the image is 1, and when the image is double tapped, we scale the image from the size of 1 to a size of 1.5. So the start value of the animation is 1 and the end value of the animation is 1.5. I also set the stiffness of the spring animation to 170 and the dampen to 15. So when we go to the timeline and preview, this is the same animation I showed in the beginning of the video. So in Kite, I created the animation and linked the animation using the tap gesture. So under the actions, you can see the action type is set to play animations. And here I have added the animation zoomed. So whenever the image is double tapped, we zoom it in and out. To demonstrate that, I'll go to the toolbar and click the option present. When I tap on the image, you can see nothing happens. When I double tap the image, we zoom it in. So let's use the same concept to prototype the double tap gestural interaction in SwiftUI. Let's begin by unfolding the code. I will double click on the 3 dots. You can see in this project, I have only the image on the screen and nothing else. We are going to do 2 things. 1, we will create the animation and add an action, which is the double tap event, so that anytime we double tap the image, we zoom it in. And once the image is zoomed in, we will use the double tap event to zoom it out. First, we will create a state and use it to set the start value of the animation. So under the comment, we are going to create a state called zoomed, and the initial state is set to false. To enable the double tap gesture on the image, we need to add a tap gesture. So over here, let's add the tap gesture. So let's add the on-tap gesture modifier. Inside the tap gesture, we need to bring the state and use it to switch the animation from the start value, which is false, to the end value, which will be true. We do that by toggling the state. So I'll put zoomed and toggle the value. Next, we need to register the tap event using the tap count. Let's go back to the kite animation to see how it works. You can see from the layer list, I have the double tap gesture action selected. When we go to the properties inspector, you can see here there is a mouse click event and also a click count set to 2. When we set the click count to 1, that uses the normal tap gesture. When we set the click count to 2, we register the tap as a double tap gesture. So let's go back to the SwiftUI animation. Over here, we can add the click count or the tap count by using the parameter count. And since we are interested in a double tap gesture, we will set the count to 2. Let's go back to the kite animation again. When I select the animation, you can see we are animating the property transform scale XY that animates both the X and Y coordinate of the image as shown over here. So let's go back to SwiftUI. We are going to use the state to animate the scale effect. So I'm going to copy it. Below the aspect ratio, I will add the scale effect modifier and paste the state. Since we have the initial value of the state set to false, we are going to use ternary conditional operation to animate the image. So I will bring question mark. When the condition is true, we will set the image size to 1.5. The next value is the false value. So when the condition is false, we will set the image to its actual size, which is 1. So let's preview to see what we have done. When I tap the image, you can see nothing happens. When I double tap, we scale it to the zoomed state and vice versa. But there is no animation yet. So let's add the spring feel as we see in the kite animation. When I select the animation in kite and go to the properties inspector, you can see here we have spring animation. We are going to use the same specification to create the SwiftUI animation. What we just did in SwiftUI is the same as these values. We have the start value set to 1 and the end value set to 1.5 using ternary conditional operation. So the next is to add the spring animation. We will come back to this animation parameters later. So let's go back to the SwiftUI project and add the animation. Above the tap gesture, we are going to add the animation modifier. The first parameter of the animation modifier is the animation type. We are going to use an interpolating spring. Let's select the first option, that is the interpolating spring that has stiffness and damping. The stiffness is defined as the tension in the spring, and the damping is defined as the backdrag frictional force that affects the motion. By going back to the animation we created in Kite, you can see over here we have these two parameters, which is the same as those in SwiftUI, the stiffness and damping. So I experimented with different stiffness and damping values. So I found later the best stiffness for this animation is 170 and the damping value is 15. Let's put the same values in SwiftUI. I will enter the stiffness as 170 and enter the damping as 15. Next, we have the value. For the value, we are going to use the state. So now, when I double tap the image, you can see it has the spring feel. Both in the zoomed in and zoomed out states. So this is how to use a double tap gesture along with spring animation to create a photo zoom interaction technique in SwiftUI.